Madam Clerk, you'll let me know when you want me to start.
Yeah, we're just waiting for a notification from Shaw.
Yeah, it's no problem.
One minute to Shaw Broadcast.
Seconds.
30 seconds to Shaw. We're live on Shaw.
Okay, so I want to welcome everybody to our meeting. I want to thank our broadcasting and media partners for broadcasting and reporting on our meeting. Happy to say that if things keep on going the way they are going, our next meeting will be in City Council chambers. In that respect, I just want to recognize the community. I think we all recognize that our community has come through so far of this pandemic well with respect to the numbers of positive cases we've seen in our community. And I just want to reiterate that I think one of the reasons why we've done that is we've largely all followed Algoma Public Health advice. And I think it's critically important as we move through stage 3 and as we get closer to the school year and as more kids return to daycare and our kids go to school, that we all recommit to Algoma Public Health advice. I think that is the most direct way for us to keep each other safe and our community safe. And so I just want to reiterate that before we start the meeting. It's critically important that if you have any COVID-19 symptoms, that you get tested. And until you get your test results back, you stay home. So if you're not feeling right and if you don't feel well or you feel funny at all, don't chalk it up to a cold or don't chalk it up to allergies. Go get tested. And until you have your test results, self-isolate, stay home. If you're out and about in the community, make sure you keep 2 meters between you and anybody else. Wear non-medical mask indoors and wash your hands frequently. It's also important that you trace your contacts. So we need you to keep track of all of your contacts so that if you do test positive, we can call those contacts and get them in for a test. So I want to thank the community for the hard work and sacrifices that you've made to date. And I just want to encourage you to keep on making them because this is not over. We are not yet out of the woods on it. We saw over the course of the weekend, the United States exceeded 5 million cases and growing. So we have to make sure that we're doing what we need to do in our community, keep our community safe. With that noted, Madam Clerk, you can start the meeting.
Under agenda item 1, adoption of minutes, I have a motion by Councillor Shoemaker and Hollingsworth resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of July 13, 2020 and special council meeting of July 27, 2020 be approved.
All in favor? Motion's carried.
And under agenda item 3, declaration of pecuniary interest, Councillor Shoemaker has declared a conflict with respect to the boardwalk remediation contract, both with the council report and the associated bylaw, as the contractor is a client of the law firm. And also with respect to bylaw 2020-147, the GFL lighting upgrades, as that contractor is a client of the law firm. I don't have any further comments.
Any other conflicts, council? Seeing none, we can move on, Madam Clerk.
Okay, I have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian resolved that the agenda for August 10, 2020 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Motion's carried.
And under agenda item 5.1, there's a proclamation for Canada United.
This was a proclamation that was brought to me by the Chamber asking for our support, asking me to make this proclamation to support a campaign the Chamber's part of. I'm happy to do it. I think it's a good campaign. and I encourage the community to support it. So I'll read the proclamation now. Whereas the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce have all joined Canada United, a national movement to support local businesses and communities across the country. And whereas as part of the movement, RBC has brought together more than 50 of Canada's leading brands, business associations, and chamber networks to rally Canadians to show local some love by buying, dining, and shopping local to help kickstart our economy. And whereas Canadians are encouraged to watch the Canada United videos online at gocanada.ca, that's gocanadaunited.ca, like posts from @GoCanadaUnited on social media, and use hashtag Canada United to demonstrate their support so that each of these actions until August 31st, 2020, RBC will contribute 5 cents up to a maximum contribution amount of $2 million to the new Canada United Small Business Relief Fund, while working with government and corporate partners to source additional contributions to the fund during the course of the campaign. Whereas the fund will provide small business with grants up to $5,000 to cover expenses related to personal protective equipment renovations, to accommodate reopening guidelines, and developing e-commerce capabilities. Whereas the Canada United Small Business Relief Fund will be administered by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce on behalf of the National Chamber Network. And small business owners who are interested in the program can visit gocanadaunited.ca or ssmcoc.com/Canada United to learn more about grant application details, including eligibility criteria and how to apply. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim and recognize August 28th to August 30th, 2020, as the Canada United weekend here in Sault Ste. Marie. And I invite all Saultites and all Canadians to join the Canada United movement by buying and dining local, including celebrating and supporting our local businesses. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Okay, and that will bring us to consent.
Okay, we're on the consent agenda. We're going to start with Councillor Vezo-Allen because she's already sent me a list of her matters. Councillor Vezo-Allen, go ahead. So Councillor Vezo-Allen, you're muted currently. Are you trying to get off mute?
Sorry about that.
No problem.
My first item is 6.3, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Jacob with regards to Appendix A. The $44,000 grant that's coming through, was that reflected in the transit revenue change from budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo, and yes, that was included in the numbers, so that reduced that deficit slightly.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. And my next question would be for Mr. Lamming regarding transit. We know that's going to be some of our biggest losses in terms of revenue. Mr. Lamming, is there a plan moving forward with transit to help mitigate some of those losses in terms of revenue?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, yes, we're looking at this very closely right now. As you know, we were on hour service. We're looking closely in the near future to move back towards half hour. We're looking at daily ridership to see the numbers trend upwards, and as that increases, we're around 2,000 riders a day. Traditionally, we're between 6,000 to 7,000 riders, so we're looking for a bit of a trend upward, and we'd be reverting back to that half hour service, thus increasing the rides that would take place.
Mr. Lamming, do you anticipate with schools as they are reopening that we might see an increase in ridership in September?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, yes, you're correct. We usually typically have a bit of a lull in the summer, and it does pick up in the fall, and we're hopeful that that'll take place again this year. Thank
you. My only other item from Appendix A, and thank you, Jacob, for putting this together, it would probably be to Mr. Johnson regarding fire overtime expenses. Your fire fuel expense, there's been a savings. So Mr. Johnson, can you clarify why we have a change in budget with the overtime?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo Allen, the overtime is due to illnesses and sick time in general, not just specific to any COVID at this time. It's like for sicknesses or injuries.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I have nothing further on 6.3.
Anybody else on 6.3? Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well-
Just a quick question to Mr. Bruzos. It says employee benefits are down because of our current situation. Does that mean basically that we're not processing, there's no insurance claims on things like dentist, massage therapy, chiropractic services?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, you're exactly right on that, mostly due to health and dental claims not going through. Further explanation on that is possibly be given by Peter Nero, but for the most part, you're correct on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the meaning of the comment or statement. That's it for me on 6.3.
Anybody else in 6.3? Councillor Vezo Allen, your next matter.
6.6, the Smart Park.
Okay, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, probably to Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, at this point in time, is it really prudent to spend staff time developing this project, especially considering how many businesses are moving to working remotely? I mean, I know a lot of people in the software industry, both here and in the US, and majority of offices are closed till 2021. So at this point, is it worth staff time to even have any considerations moving forward with this project?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo Allen. Apologies, that was on 6.5, the online learning training system?
No, 6.6, Mr. Acting CEO.
6.6, the Smart Park.
Okay, thank you, I missed that. Yes, at this time, I would say that the report is really a reflection, a request from council to come back to report on the Smart Industrial Business Park. There are 2 pieces of property that staff are investigating, but we're a long ways down the road before we would bring council a report with the associated business plan associated with the Smart Park. And certainly, before we did that, we would want to ensure that the business climate was right for such an investment. So this report was more of an update report just to reflect that we are investigating properties, but it will be some time before we would come back, and agreed we would want to be sure that it was the right business climate to make that investment.
I think though.
Thank you, Mr. Ver.
I think the nature of the question though, Mr. Ver, I think you might have missed it, was, is it worth spending staff time on this now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo Allen. We aren't investing a lot of staff time on this. It's some preliminary work that's just been done to look at the availability of certain properties. So this wouldn't be a a high priority item that we're currently pursuing at the moment.
Mr. Ver, just to kind of confirm, is this basically something that you're going to put on the shelf to wait until we see what the environment is like?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo Allen. I would say that, we've made some inquiries into the availability of certain pieces of land. And then beyond that, we're not actively working on any detailed plans at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ver.
Okay, anybody, is that your only question on 6.6? Councillor Vezo Allen? Any other
Yes.
people, any other questions on 6.6? Okay, Councillor Vezo Allen, your next matter?
6.14. And it really just has to do with the containers. So I don't know if that would be Mr. Turco or Mr. McConnell.
Well, just ask your question and we'll let Mr. Ver triage it however he sees fit.
Okay. Just concerning the budget of $239,000. So I did some digging And a 20-foot container through StoreStack is between $2,400 to $2,900 each. So how many modular container units are you considering with that budget item?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. We're still doing some investigation on the different price options and the ranges, and perhaps I can provide a little bit of background to council on this. The modular retail units, the actual format of them, we're going to do some further research and analysis, and we would come back to council once we had, further information related to the costs and then the number of units. What we did envision that these modular units would be movable, so they would be available to be located potentially along the waterfront. We've had calls or requests, ideas for waterfront activation along the boardwalk. We've had opportunities where when the cruise ships arrive, we may be able to locate these modular units in the Bondar Pavilion to welcome cruise ship guests. We have the Plaza project that we're advancing, so they could be moved there. The Spring Street walkway or Woonerf that we've talked about. So what we envision is these modular units would be able to be moved and located on different areas of the city based on the need. And then the outfitting of the units, that's where some of the costs can increase greatly. So that's where more research is going to be done depending on the requirements. Some of them are very basic and would be a mobile retail unit that the side could open up and serve patrons. Others of them could include actually being outfitted with, kitchen type facilities. So we're going to do some additional research and return to council with more information. But for now, we were earmarking some funds to apply to that project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And what I would like to see coming forward to council would be a business plan, especially in terms of rental opportunity, businesses that are interested, that are committed to the project, as well as, what are we doing with them in terms of maintenance, repair, and storage during, the winter time. If they're not able, then you're looking at costs in terms of if we have to store them indoors and things like that. So I'd like to really see a thorough business plan moving forward with the modular units, as well as consultation with existing businesses, especially in our downtown core. We know businesses have been affected with COVID, to ensure that everyone has a contribution in terms of community input with this. So thank you. No further questions on that item.
Okay, so Tom, before I move on, because I do have other questions on that, I just want to be pointed for council. There'll be no procurement on this part of the project until you come back to us with more information. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So I have Councillor Gardy on the same matter, 6.14, and then Councillor Christian.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Deputy CAO Ver. These cargo containers, are they the only option for this type of thing, Tom? Is that the only type you're exploring in these refurbished containers?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, we are exploring other options. So you're correct. They may not be shipping containers. There might be other forms of modular units that we're going to evaluate and look at the cost of to determine the best bang for our buck.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, again to Mr. Ver. Would once these came to fruition, if they came to fruition, would different vendors be renting and or leasing them, or would they just be provided to them on an as needed or as wanted basis for a period of time?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, we envision there could be a range of options, and that's something we'll certainly bring back to council in more detail. We have seen in other communities programs that were launched that were sort of almost an incubator, where they allowed an entrepreneur to try out a retail or a service business in one of these modular units. And the idea being that if it was successful, they would, graduate and take up a storefront in the downtown. So, there's a mix of different ideas we have for the use of these containers that we will bring back to council.
Well, that's where I was headed. I think it could be used, they could be used as an incubator, but they could also be used as a mixed kind of use of those for established businesses as well. One final comment is I would just, and I'm sure you will, I'm just wondering if there are any local firms or contractors or anybody locally who could provide such units. And I'm hopeful that that is something that staff will explore. Thank you.
Okay, so just so everybody's aware, I do have a list. So I have Councillor Shoemaker, Councillor Christian, Councillor Shoemaker, Councillor Hollingsworth, and Councillor Bruni left on this matter. So Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, in the concept of providing temporary space for small businesses, has there been any discussion or thought to discussing with downtown landlords about possibly designating some vacant space for temporary usage and rental space that perhaps in lieu of building a container, we could subsidize some rent for some of these small businesses? Is that a concept that you've considered or had conversations about?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yes, that is something that staff has considered, and in the past, I know discussions have taken place with different landlords in the downtown core to explore that.
I appreciate the effort in trying to create new dynamics downtown and provide opportunities. I've got to be honest, though, I don't appreciate the way the report was written, because when you say there's shipping containers, it raises a red flag with local media. The public picks up on it and they draw their own conclusions. I think it would have been better said that we were looking at some type of temporary mobile units that can be used, rather than using the word shipping containers, because everybody conjures up their own ideas, including council. I appreciate that you're going out there to look at different options, and I just want to emphasize to the public that shipping containers, as we view them, would never be approved by me, that I'm waiting for staff to come back with something concrete and solid that's, I guess, palatable for the entire community, because just talking about shipping containers doesn't do it for me. Thank you.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, at one point, there had been some discussion of the city assuming or buying as part of.
Councillor Shoemaker, we've lost your audio. So can you try get? No, we don't have audio there with you. So I'm going to anticipate Councillor Shoemaker was going to ask during the process when we were working with the former owner of the Mill Market, and there were a number of mobile units that they owned, and there was some discussion that we might purchase those. What happened with that, or how does that factor into this? Councillor Shoemaker, just nod if I caught on to where you were going. Yeah. Yeah, no, I can't. You're not coming through. You want to try one more time? No. Maybe you can call in on your phone, Councillor Shoemaker, and like still use your video, but call in from your phone for audio. In the meantime, Acting CEO, if you could, if you understood the direction he was going in there, if you can answer that, please.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. Some of those units were purchased by the city, and are being used for storage, and we've used them as well for some of the recreation and culture activities. I would say the modular retail units that we're talking about would have a bit more finish and appeal to them, and additional space that would be available in what was envisioned.
Okay, so we can move on to Councillor Hollingsworth then. Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Hollingsworth, you're on mute right now.
Yes, I know. I was trying to get it off.
Okay.
So thank you. Most of my questions were answered. I just have comments, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Okay, just briefly, first of all, I like how the staff's looking at a unique opportunity here. Maybe it's not containers, but I think it's a great unique opportunity. Actually, I was happy to give some pictures to Mr. Ver about a year ago, what Detroit's doing, what Toronto's doing, and what Las Vegas is doing with their containers. They are geared towards young entrepreneurs to help young entrepreneurs start their own first-time businesses. Also, Detroit was using it along their waterfront to rent out kayaks. So I'm under the impression that Mr. Ver and his staff are looking at Detroit, Toronto, and Vegas for other ideas, and that it's really emphasizing for arts, and it's really emphasizing startup young people, pop-up shops, not taking away from existing businesses. So again, I look forward to having more information in the future from Mr. Ver and the rest of the staff. And yes, a plan would be welcomed, but let's keep an open mind. This is a unique opportunity that will give Sault Ste. Marie a different look. So let's keep on promoting young entrepreneurs, and this could be one way we can help them. Thank you.
Councilor Bruni?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions were mostly for the shipping containers. But now I guess it's clarified a little bit that possibility they're not shipping containers. So I guess mine is more of a comment because of the uncertainty now that they may not be shipping containers. The $239,000 will not be spent. It will come back to council for final approval. Am I correct?
You're correct. There won't be any procurement on this project until a plan's brought back to council.
Okay, fair enough.
Mr. Ver, can you just please confirm that for the record for Councilor Bruni?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, that is correct. We will come back to council with the complete plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so anybody else in 6.14? Seeing none, Councilor Vezo-Allen, did you have one more matter? I think, oh no, you didn't on consent. Those were your matters on consent, Councilor Vezo. So does anybody else have any matter on consent? Councilor Gardy. And then Councilor Christian. Councilor Gardy?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to put a little attention on 6.7, the broadband application with Sengen. I think it's a great initiative. I want to give some recognition to Councillor Scott as well, because I believe he was also quite involved in this. And I think it will provide some relief to people in the western limits and northern limits of our communities, particularly in Ward 5, with gaining broadband access, obviously, and hopefully our two local representatives at the federal and provincial government can start, their governments can start pursuing a little bit more vigorously some plans that they have to expand this type of access to rural and remote parts of the province, of which parts of our community will benefit. So that's all I had on 6.7.
I'm going to go to Councilor Scott on that one next. Councilor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Gardy. I know that this is something, it's not really going to be a question because I am quite familiar with it.
Go ahead.
But I know that it is something that Councilor Gardy and I have been working on to try to get the residents of Ward 5 more reliable internet. We've heard from many of them throughout the area on this matter throughout this whole pandemic. And it is something that we think that we can really push for. I think, like he was mentioning, if we could get the local representation from federal and provincial governments to do what they can to support this, I think it goes a long way. Today's world, everything is done on the internet, and without having a reliable internet, it's kind of scary. I want to thank Tom's group, Mr. Ver's group, because I know that he did a lot of good work on this for me. The Innovation Center staff as well, getting this all together. It was a short turnaround due to the timelines, but I'm hopeful that at the very least, we can be in support of this as a city. And then, you know what, we can go from there. And that shows these companies that, hey, we're willing to help out and give you our support as a city if you can help us out and give our residents what they need for internet access. So that was basically all I wanted to touch on for that. It's very important to both myself and Councillor Gardy, so I'm happy to see it on here.
Okay, anybody else on 6.7? Councillor Christian on 6.7?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I reiterate those comments. As a teacher in the West End, and given our current situation, it's good to know that we're taking some steps moving into the 21st century. Quick question, though, for Mr. Ver. Is this the only pilot project of this type in Northern Ontario, or is this running simultaneously with other locales?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, there are other Northern Ontario communities that are applying for this SenGen fund.
Two more quick questions. In your discussions, is it possible, or will this pilot project have a positive impact on on parts of the city or the rest of the city, or is this pretty much isolated to the area identified?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, typically the way these technologies work, like this pilot technology, is it is a specific geographic location that would benefit from the service. But what it will allow us to do is pilot out the technology and see how it works. And there may be other opportunities in other locations of the city that this technology could be applied, applied to.
Final question. Is there any indication as to how long this pilot project lasts before we render a decision or come up with an outcome?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, I don't have a timeline on how long they'll pilot the technology, but I would think once approved, and the installation would be a fairly short period of time, we'll have a good sense on how the technology performs, within, I would say 6 to 8 months.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anybody else on 6.7? Councillor Gardy, do you have anything else on consent?
Yeah, two more, Mr. Mayor, 6.15 and 6.16.
Well, we'll go with 6.15 then.
Quickly, I believe through you, Mr. Mayor, to maybe Mrs. Hamilton Beach, if she's on the line. In the report, I had read that I believe it was 13 out of 17 of the catch basins were repaired at the underpass, or sorry, to Mr. Girardi, I guess. As you guys got some access to the site, I suspect that the drainage was considerably improved based upon the work you did, Mr. Girardi. And is there any additional work that needs to get done in the immediate few years, or will there be an opportunity if there is a need to supplement some of the work you guys did? That's it.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, certainly this is going to be an improvement to it. Will it resolve every issue when we have a 100-year storm? Probably not, but we definitely identified some piping and some infrastructure that needed repairs. There were many catch basins that were damaged, like you said, and I think you'll see an improvement certainly in there. And it also gave us an opportunity, which we haven't had in several years, to do some significant road work in there. So you'll notice that the passage through there now is quite smooth and much improved. Now, is there work to be done down the road? There will always be other work to be done, but quite frankly, we have nothing major to do in there at this time. It should be good for a while.
Perfect. That was the answer I was hoping for. I appreciate it.
Anybody else in 6.15? Seeing nothing, Councillor Gardy, 6.16.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I guess, I'm thinking Mr. Ramil, if he's on the phone, or Mr. Elliott. I suspect that engineering has some future plans for remediation work along the river, considering the rise in the Great Lakes and St. Mary's River. Having walked along the river a few times this summer, I noticed just west of Clerk Park, there's some issues. I was just wondering if you'd be able to let us know of any areas along the river that may require remediation in the next year or two, in addition to what is covered by the work that Avery's doing.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, I'm not aware of any other major issues along the waterfront, with the exception of our stormwater outfalls. We have about 40 stormwater outfalls that are affected by extreme high waters like this, and they were in poor condition to begin with. So that is one big infrastructure question along the waterfront that is going to need some money. But as far as boardwalk repair, if we get this project done between this year and next year, we think we're in fairly good shape.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else in 6.16? Seeing none, Councilor Gardy, those are the extent of your matters on consent.
Indeed,
Yeah.
yes.
Councilor Christian, did you have another matter on consent?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. What is it?
6.5, this training software.
Okay, go ahead.
Just for clarification, there's a fee the first year, and then there's 22,500 for 2 subsequent years. Is that 22,500 for each year, or 22 for that amount for the 2 years left in the contract?
I'm gonna ask Mr. Ver to either answer that question or send it to whoever he thinks the best place is to answer it. Mr. Ver?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Christian. The annual fees of 22,500 would be for the 2 years only, and then the subsequent years would be in addition to that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Now, just to be clear, or to review, or to remind us, what are the expected outcomes from this training software? What is the goal? What is the intent of the training software?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Christian. It's going to provide an easy to manage portal that will monitor the training that's required across city staff. And it allows staff to access certain prepackaged content online. So this work was, or this project was in the works pre-pandemic, but it will likely prove more valuable now, making it easier for staff to train from home and access this content remotely.
Okay, so if I could just rephrase the question, perhaps, what modules or courses would the software provide?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Christian, I don't have the detailed list in front of me of all the different modules, but in conversation, the different training programs required by staff across various areas of the company will be able to be accessed through this portal.
Okay, so we don't know if it's for basic customer service, or whether the software will provide an opportunity, a venue for, say, staff members who wish to move within the organization, to ascend within the organization, like management training modules, et cetera. We don't have that information. And if we don't, could it be provided?
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Christian, yes, we can provide that information.
Okay. And finally, on this issue, intellectual training catalog. I guess at the end we get an intellectual training catalog. Can you explain what that is?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Christian, the course content that they mentioned that will accompany this training portal is funded, and those through the different training budgets of the departments. So we can provide that detailed list of all that course content, but that's something that comes with this package. It's not just the shell of the portal, but there'll actually be some content there that will be able to be accessed by staff.
Right, but the way I read it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like at some point, once we're into the program, we actually own or have full possession or rights to that catalog. Am I misreading that, or is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Christian, I'll have to confirm that with staff. Sometimes the content you acquire in years 2 and 3, as it mentions, are there on a license basis. So as long as you're a licensee of the technology, you'd be able to access it. In other cases, you obtain rights to it. So I'll have to confirm that with staff and report back.
Thank you. That's it on that item.
Anybody else in 6.5? Do you have any other items, Councilor Christian?
One quick question on 6.9 to Mr. Lamming.
Go ahead, 6.9.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that we struck a deal with Sioux College on this 50-year lease. I don't recall seeing anything about a cost per year for the lease. Is there any cost, or is it just a legal document arrangement we have?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, the cost is a nominal $1.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else in 6.9? Nope. Councillor Shoemaker, we'll go to you now on consent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
We can, it's working.
Okay, 6.13 outdoor patio approval.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment and thank staff. Obviously, when the government of Ontario and our rules were loosened for patios, we knew that issues would crop up, but this cropped up for a patio in town, and staff have been able to get it resolved rather quickly. So everybody was pulling in the same direction here, and this came together and came to us within a matter of 5 to 7 days. So good turnaround on this, and I'm sure the subject location greatly appreciates it.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. I see this council as a good example of why we need to give staff some discretion in applying our bylaws. When we pass a bylaw, they're bound to it. So they can't act outside of the parameters of the bylaw. And they don't have much discretion to, apply bylaws if they need to give or take a little bit here or there to have something work. So they did work quickly on this. I thank them for that, but I think it's good that staff has some discretion, that we trust them with that discretion so they can make reasonable and sensible decisions in the context of the bylaw. So anybody else in 6.13? Councilor Bruni. Councilor Bruni, you're mute. You're still muted.
My apologies.
No problem.
To Mr. McConnell, how many outdoor patios do we have presently operating?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, in the downtown area, there's 14 that are operating now. Now, that doesn't include the 2 large permanent patios at the Delta Hotel or Montana's. So there's 16. Throughout the city, I don't really have a good number there, other than to say numerous. There are many patios that have been established throughout the community that do not require municipal approvals. Right. And that's part of the reason you saw so many go up so quickly.
Yeah. And just for comparison, how many outdoor patios did we have last year? Would you know that?
I think along Queen Street we had 4.
4. And now we have approximately 14.
There's about 14, in the downtown area.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Hollingsworth on 6.13.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Don McConnell. I'm just looking ahead with regards to patios. Sometimes our winter changes quite quickly. Before you know it, it's going to be cold, particularly winter. In our bylaws, or are you or any staff member is looking at the future for type of restrictions? Can patios still be operated in the cooler months, in the winter months? For example, I have an owner who has a patio that's thinking outside the box. And of course, they're thinking of putting up heaters so they can extend their patio season. They're also looking at putting up some maybe see-through barriers. Of course, there's COVID restrictions, but something to protect his patrons and from the elements of the cooler weather. So in your opinion, are there any restrictions as we move forward into the cooler months that we need to be aware of and that can help our patio owners so that their business can be extended?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Hollingsworth, there's really 2 parts to that question. The first part is, as it gets cooler in September and early October, can they put heaters up? Yes, they can. That is in the guidelines, provided they're CSA approved. I think with Council's approval tonight, staff now has some flexibility in allowing additional structures that would help with the wind and help to contain the heat a bit. However, when winter comes, there is a deadline to remove those patios. because it's really impossible to do snow removal operations on downtown sidewalks when those patios are there. So we have like a two-part. The first part, September, they're probably good. After that, when snow comes, those patios need to be removed before the snow really hits us.
And one last question. I think there are just not that many patios that are not actually on sidewalks, that are more, I guess, in parking lots and so forth. So I guess, again, that's a one-off that you and your staff can help with as time goes on, I'm under the assumption. Thank you.
Anybody else in 6.13? Okay, we can move on. Councillor Shoemaker, do you have anything else? Council, do we have any other matters on consent? I'm gonna go back to Councillor Dufour, because Councillor Dufour had a question on the matter that we passed by, and I didn't mark him down and I missed him then. So I apologize to Councillor Dufour, and I'm gonna give him a chance to ask on 6.3. Go ahead, Councillor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much appreciated. My question, I believe, is for Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, in the report here on COVID financial update, we read about how some good news. We've got some of our bigger tax accounts coming further into compliance. My question is, now that that number is down to only about 10 more large tax accounts, is there an opportunity here for economic development staff to go out and touch base with some of these account holders that are still in arrears, further assistance, whether that be advice or whatnot? You guys did a great job, if that can be offered.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, I would say certainly there's an opportunity. Our economic development staff have been reaching out independently of the tax returns and filings to the city, but there is an opportunity for us to support these businesses and check in with them to see what support can be provided.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Vera. I'm happy to hear that. And then the second question I have on the same report relates to building activity, and I'm not sure if this one might be better for Mr. McConnell or Michelle, but we're showing a net assessment growth to June 30th of negative 0.17%. My question is, does this include the projects that are currently within one of the 4 years of our rental CIP, our community improvement plan? So is that assessment growth phased in, or is it included right at the beginning?
Okay, so we'll, Mr. McConnell, if you want to pass that question along to Michelle, you're welcome to, or a combination of both of you can answer it, but we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The assessment growth for the new projects that are identified from time to time in our various reports on community improvement plans are factored in once the project is complete and it's reassessed by MPAC. So yes, those ones that are in there and are being taxed at the full rate, they would be in there. But I'll ask Michelle to elaborate on that further.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour. Mr. McConnell has answered the question fairly completely. The only thing I'd like to mention is that the growth is for the current year, so it would be any new CIP projects that have been completed this year to date. I don't think there's been a significant amount of those that are completed at this point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is that the extent of your questions on 6.3, Councillor Dufour?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, that brings us to the end of the consent agenda.
And the motion by Councillors Hilstinger and Hollingsworth resolves that all items listed under date August 10, 2020, agenda item 6, consent agenda, be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Motion's carried. Council, you note that we do have some planning matters on. We'll have to start planning at 5:30, so we don't have significant time to get into 7.3.1, which is the Sue Greyhound Memorial Cut bid. I think that's going to take us more than 10 minutes. So what I'd like to do, if we can, is to skip to the motion that Councillors Dufour and Vezo-Allen have on at 8.1, and at least we can deal with that and get that out of the way. I think we could probably deal with that in 10 minutes. And then we could, if we're at consent, if we're at planning at that point, we'll go to planning. And if we're not quite yet at planning, we'll start the Memorial Cup discussion. Is that okay with you, Madam Clerk?
So I will read the motion under agenda item 8.1, insurance requirements for patios. It's a motion by Councillors Dufour and Vezo-Allen. Whereas during the current COVID-19 environment, many eating establishments have developed outdoor patios to serve customers and maintain business operations. And whereas patios offer an alternative for patrons, and whereas currently in Sault Ste. Marie, applicants must maintain minimum liability insurance of $2 million, which increases to $5 million where alcohol is involved. And whereas the increase in insurance liability can raise premiums for business owners on average from $1,600 to $2,000. And whereas many other municipalities across Ontario only require $2 million in liability insurance where alcohol is served. City of Sudbury, City of Toronto, City of Waterloo, City of Barrie. And whereas to promote and support local businesses to grow and thrive, now therefore be it resolved that the legal department be requested to review and report back regarding insurance requirements for all patio establishments, including a bylaw amendment fixing liability insurance at $2 million.
Okay, so Councillor, was this Councillor Vezo-Allen? Did you write this resolution? Did you want to start with you then? We'll go to Councillor Dufour, or who's starting here?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, well, Councillor Dufour, we got your volume here, so you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor. This resolution, I think we've seen from discussion previous to this meeting that patios have proved extremely popular, especially during this time when you know, a lot of would-be patrons definitely feel a lot more comfortable sitting outside, spaced out. I think this is a fairly simple, quick way that the city can do even more to help out the business owners who have been struggling from the COVID shutdown. And I think it's one that can be done with very minimal and acceptable risk to the municipality. And I hope that my fellow councillors will support it. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lisa Vezo-Allen, please.
Really, the only thing to add would be a simple example of a like community would be the City of Sudbury and Greater Sudbury. So they only require $2 million. And there definitely has been feedback from patio owners with the $5 million where alcohol is involved, that it is very cost prohibitive. And this is just a way that, you know, we're on par with our, you know, our other like municipality in the north in Sudbury, and anything that we can do to save businesses. And, you know, we have created this really cool patio culture that, you know, both Councillor Dufour and I hope with my colleagues want to see grow and expand, especially with all the other things that we are doing in terms with future SSM, even, you know, with trying to promote ourselves as the mountain bike, you know, destination. I mean, mountain bikers love to bike to patios after they're done. And I think this just helps to entice other restaurateurs to develop patios. And I hope we have our colleagues' support for this.
Before I take further questions or comments, I wanted to make one myself, because this issue has been bugging me for a while, and I've raised it with staff internally. And I think one of the things that we all have to appreciate and recognize is that it's often a requirement of our insurance. So it's not as if the city staff had said, okay, we want $5 million of coverage. It's a matter of our insurer requiring $5 million of coverage. And, you know, I push back against that because it seems excessive and like we're overinsured, because then we have our policy, and our policy is requiring parties that get a license under us to carry another policy. So between those two policies, you'd have significant coverage. You'd have more than $5 million of coverage. So there are some instances where we might be required to do it by our insurer to keep our insurance. And if we decide not to do it, it could have an effect on the cost of our insurance. So I just want council to know that. But like, I support it because I think in a number of cases, we're requiring people who are licensing to overinsure. And that's not a requirement we're necessarily putting in place, but it's a requirement that we're putting in place to comply with our insurance policy. And I think we should be pushing back on our own insurer everywhere we can to not require that other people who do business in our community overinsure. So I respect the spirit and appreciation of your motion. I agree with it. I've had these conversations internally with staff, and I did want to give our city solicitor an opportunity to speak to it. So maybe she can outline to you some of the challenges from the legal department staff and maybe some areas they might be limited in. But I think the message from council is clear, is we don't want to require our businesses to get more insurance than they need, reasonably need in a set of circumstances. So Madam City Solicitor, did you want to speak to this? Or did you want to give council any information in that regard?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to, we'll have to take a look at the policy. I totally appreciate that we're here to help the that patio community grow and not further burden them. So we're going to take a good look at what our policies require and do our best to bring back the resolution that you're asking for.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments on that motion or questions on that motion? Councillor Gardy?
Yeah, quickly through you, Mr. Mayor. I was just a question about as to with the reduction from 5 to 2 million. I was just wondering, on average, how much that would save a business annually.
Staff's not going to be able to answer that because it depends on their own policies and there's a lot that goes into figuring out what the policy is going to cost. So staff doesn't know what the delta is on each of these different policies.
Understood. And so just to Councillors Vezo Allen and Dufour, good on you for bringing it forward. It's a good move. I support it wholeheartedly.
Okay, so all in favor, you have the motion up on your screen. If you just indicate for the folks watching at home if you're in favor, and then vote please on your e-scribe.
Okay, that motion passes.
So, Madam Clerk, we're
Do you want me
going
to?
to go on, Madam Clerk.
I was going to say we could do the bylaws under consent.
Can we do the bylaws in advance of 7.3.1?
I don't think there are any bylaws. Let me just, there aren't on the planning. No, we could go ahead and do that.
We can deal with the
I have a
bylaws
motion.
now. Yeah, if you
I
like.
have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date August 10, 2020 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
So we've got 4 minutes until 5:30,
Well,
and I believe we have.
We have to wait till 5:30. But Mr. Ver, did you want to take a chance before 5:30 to speak to 7.3.1, and then after we're done planning, we can get on to council. But we might as well use the time.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, we can speak to that. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry. The request is for the Sioux Greyhounds, who are looking to host the Memorial Cup, and they have applied through the Economic Development Fund for support of the Memorial Cup for $300,000. In council's package, you'll note that there are past examples of the economic impact for this event, and the Greyhounds certainly are looking to host this event in 2021. The OHL has confirmed they are going ahead with the season, barring any additional pandemic outcomes, and also that they were planning to proceed with the Memorial Cup in June of next year. And if the event were not to take place, obviously the funds would not be put towards the Memorial Cup. So if something happens and the event has to be canceled, or we can't have a full Memorial Cup experience with the fans in the stands, then this would obviously change, and the city wouldn't be providing the Economic Development Fund support. From a impact perspective, if the event does proceed, certainly we feel it would be a marquee event for Sault Ste. Marie. It's a national hockey event a lot of people are familiar with. There's great attendance impact on hotel room stays and, spending in the community while the event is going on. So we feel it'd be a significant impact locally to our local businesses, as well as showcases the community on a national stage, which certainly brings a number of advantages for community promotion. And so the Greyhounds are pursuing additional funding from Tourism Sault Ste. Marie and NOHFC. They do have to make a bid proposal to the OHL, and right now the competition is between us and Oshawa. And so having the approval from council now for this funding will help them in finalizing their bid package. Mr. Mayor, perhaps that's an overview and I can take any questions now.
Yeah, well, we actually, you're not gonna, because it's a great, you ate up that 4 minutes, great, but we're just about to hit planning. So we're gonna go back to the clerk and then we'll pick up. I have a list for the record. I've got, and when we come back, Councillor Nero, Councillor Bruni, and then Councillor Christian. Okay, Madam Clerk, when it's 5:30 on your watch, we can start the planning agenda. Council, we're gonna ask you to bear with me tonight. This is different. We're gonna be sitting under the Planning Act, and we have a different process under the Planning Act. And we do have people calling in to speak to matters. So we'll have to be patient with Madison, the deputy clerk, and the clerk and I as we work through this. What we're gonna do is at the beginning of the matter, I'm gonna ask Mr. McConnell to speak to the matter and give us a brief outline of it, and then we'll go through our regular planning process. Madam Clerk?
Okay, under agenda item 7.7.1, I have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that the report of the junior planner dated August 10, 2020 concerning rezoning application A220Z 305 Selby Road be received, and that council approve the application and rezone the subject property from single detached residential zone R2 to low density residential zone R3S with a special exception to reduce the number of required parking spaces for the semi-detached dwelling from 3 spaces to 2 spaces. Further, that the legal department be requested to prepare the bylaw necessary to effect the same. The applicant, Mike Savino, was in the waiting room and has now been allowed into the meeting.
Okay, so Mr. Savino can hear us, and he's involved in the meeting here. Before we get to Mr. Savino, we are going to go to Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, could you speak to the application, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This first application concerns a rather large property on the south side of Selby Road, just east of Cora Road. The property is vacant, and the proposal is to rezone to allow a semi-detached dwelling built there, which is one building with 2 units in it. It is recommended for approvals. I don't believe there's any outstanding concerns from the residents on this. And Mr. Savino is also on the line, and we're available to answer questions.
Mr. Savino, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak to your application if you'd like to speak to your application.
Good evening. I have no comments at all.
Okay. To the deputy clerk, do we have anybody else that's on the line that wants to speak in favor of this application?
No, we don't have anybody else registered to speak to this application.
And we have no one registered to speak against the application, Madam Clerk?
That's correct.
So there's no one else that's registered to speak to this. So council, you've heard from Mr. McConnell. The applicant did not have any comments. We don't have anybody else that's registered to speak to it, either for or against. Do you have any questions of staff on this application? Seeing none, we can have a vote on the application. All in favor? Please vote on eScribe. Mr. Savino, your application is carried. Good luck with your development. And
Thank you.
You don't need to stay on the line with us any longer. That moves us to 7.7.2, Madam Clerk.
Resolution by Councilors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that the report of the planner dated August 10, 2020 concerning rezoning application A1119Z be received, and that council approve the application and rezone the subject properties from single detached residential zone R2 to low density residential zone R3S, with a special exception to permit 2 multiple attached buildings subject to the following provisions. 1, a 1.8 meter fence must be constructed along the east line. 2, a 2.4 meter fence must be installed between the subject property and 232 Prentice Avenue. 3, the subject property be deemed as an area of site plan control. Further, that the legal department be requested to prepare the bylaws necessary to effect the same. And Ralph McDaglia has been allowed access into the meeting. He is an agent for the applicant.
Okay, before we get to Mr. McDaglia, we're going to ask Mr. McConnell to give us a general synopsis on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a property that has access onto both Second Line West and Prentice Avenue. It's an L-shaped piece of property. Council did first deal with this last summer, and it was deferred at that time to allow the applicant to go back and reconsider his design. The proposal in front of council tonight is for 2 townhouse buildings, one with 4 units and one with 3 units. It is recommended for approval. As the city clerk mentioned, it's subject to several conditions. And Mr. Medaglia is on the line, and we're available to answer questions from council on this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Medaglia, do you have any comments you want to make in favor of the application?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. McConnell. Yeah, I do have one quick question. It's the requirement for an 8-foot fence, which we, Mr. Lento and I feel that it's probably a little excessive for the area. An 8-foot fence is structurally different to build and also to maintain. So if a 6-foot fence could be allowed, which seems to be the go-to fence in the city of Sault Ste. Marie anyway, the go-to height, we certainly would appreciate if that could be changed to a 6-foot fence.
Okay, do you have any other comments to make on the application, Ralph?
No, the application, we agree with the other 2 issues. Yeah, there are no issues there.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, do you have anybody else that's registered to speak in favor of the application?
I do not. We received, there is in the agenda package an email in support and a letter in opposition, but I received no further requests to speak.
Okay, so we have no one that's requested to speak in opposition to the application for the record. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, as the clerk has pointed out, we do have an email in favor and an email opposed that's on the record here. Council, do you have any questions for staff? I'm going to start with Councilor Bruni. Councilor Bruni? You have to unmute, Councilor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess question to Mr. McConnell regarding the fencing. I'm trying to bring it up that I guess we have concerns with residents 232 and 240 on Prentice, and also 420 Second Line. The backyards of 232 and 240 Prentice is very minimal right now because Mr. Lento is building the fourplex and the triplex. And Mr. Medaglia did mention that an 8-foot fence is excessive, but in all honesty, for the neighbors there, an 8-foot fence is necessary. So they do have privacy. Obviously, there's going to be more vehicles, so there will be some noise. I'm all for the development, but I think we have to kind of lean over to the residents that are being affected. And to put an 8-foot fence, I believe is the right choice. So to Mr. McConnell, do you agree with regarding the fencing, or are we going to go with a 6-foot fence? The recommendation is 8 foot, but what's staff recommending?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, staff is also recommending the 8-foot fence. It's a little bit of an unusual situation there. Normally, you're right, 6 foot would be sufficient, but in this case, the homeowner on Prentice has a elevated deck, and in order to create an effective visual barrier, the 8-foot fence is necessary, hence the staff recommendation on this.
Okay, and my other question is, the property 232 and the one north of it, because there will be a roadway in between 232 and was it 240? If I'm not.
Yes.
Yeah. Will there be fencing by the driveway on both sides? How's that going to be landscaped?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, it would be difficult to put a fence in there because that is their driveway on that side. And if the fence were put on the lot line, it would be right up against their driveway. I realize they have another driveway on the property that they use, but they also use that driveway on the south side as well. It would be very difficult to do that. We can review that as part of the site plan agreement with the owner of 240. But when we first looked at that, that would be very difficult.
So the 8-foot fence would affect 232, 240, and 420 second line. Am I correct?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councilor Bruni again. At this point, the only person who has asked for a fence is the property owner at 232, and she had asked that the fence could be increased in height from 6 feet to 8 feet.
Right.
For 420, which is the 420 second line, which is the house right on the corner, they have very significant landscaping and a hedge down there. And I think if we put the fence in, that hedge would be lost. So that is not being recommended.
So who's the owner of the hedge? 420 or Mr. Lentil's property?
I believe it strides the property line.
So there's no owner?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is something that would be, we would have a detailed landscape plan as part of the site plan agreement. So this is something that can be reviewed further, that will be reviewed further.
But my concern is, once it starts, the construction, how can you enforce it after?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the plan agreement and financial guarantees are put in place before any construction begins, before a building permit is issued.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Gardy, you have a comment on 7.7.2?
I do. Just for some clarification, there was reference to 420 second line. Is it 412 or 420? Just for my clarity.
Mr. Mayor, I believe it's 420 is the house. 412 is the actual property. Sorry, 412 is the subject property the council is dealing with now. 420 second line west is the abutting house.
Understood. You know, I was going to comment that this had been going back and forth, and it seemed that it was a decent example of planning and the developer working together to assuage some concerns in and around the neighborhood, and that planning had. I am hopeful that Mr. Medaglia and Mr. Lento will consider the 8-foot fence, as it looks like the only kind of thing to get done to really seal the deal to everybody's approval. So I'm hopeful that they will consider that, but I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Lento and planning for spending some time on this over the course of the last 10, 12 months to get to this point anyway. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that wants to speak to 7.0? Oh, sir, Councilor Scott, I have you here. Would you like to speak to this? I think he might be frozen. Or he's sitting really still. Yeah, I have Councilor Scott on my list here, but we don't have him right now. So any other councilors want to speak to 7.7.2? Councilor Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. I apparently cut out. I just have a quick comment on this item, similar along the lines of Councilor Gardy. I'm happy to see that this has come back and it's going through. I expressed my dissatisfaction last time that they had to change from a single unit to two separate units. But regardless of that, I do want to see this go through. I think it's nice to see young developers working in the city of Sault Ste. Marie, building these beautiful new homes in areas that are underutilized or that are just vacant lots. I think that this is a great project. I am hopeful. I think that the 8-foot fence makes sense. I agree with Councillor Bruni. I'm hopeful that that goes through as well. But I'm just happy to see this come back and continue on.
Okay. So, I think it's a good development, and I appreciate the effort the developer made to accommodate the neighbors and work with our planning staff. So thank you for that. I think it's a positive development. I'm certainly going to support it. As it stands, as a condition that we have the staff suggesting an 8-foot fence, Ralph has asked council to consider 6. If no one's going to move 6 feet, then there won't be an amendment to the motion. We'll vote on it as it is, and it's going to be 8. So does anybody else have any comments on this? Seeing none, you have the motion in front of you. It's posted. All in favor, for the record, put your hands up in the air if you're in favor. Cast your vote on eScribe, please. So for the proponent, the application is approved on the conditions staff recommended. We appreciate your time tonight. Ralph, you no longer have to stay on the call, and thank you for making the effort.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So 7.7.3 Wright Street BDI Holdings Limited. Madam Clerk.
I have a motion by Councillors Christian and Shoemaker, resolved that the report of the planner dated August 10, 2020 concerning rezoning application A320Z be received, and that council approve the application and rezone the subject property from single detached residential zone R2 to low density residential zone R3S with the following special exceptions. Permit a multiple attached building, permit parking spaces in the required front yard, reduce the required front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 5.8 meters, reduce the required rear yard setback from 10 meters to 6.7 meters, and the subject be deemed as an area of site plan control. Further, that the legal department be requested to prepare the bylaws necessary to effect the same. Sean Spur and Frank Dedetta, principals of the applicant, have been allowed into the meeting.
Okay. So before we get to Mr. Spur and Mr. Dedetta, I'm going to go to Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, can you give council and those watching at home a summary of the application, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This property is located at the very end of Wright Street. Wright Street is a small street east of Gooley Avenue, south of Second Line. It actually abuts the creek diversion channel in there. The proposal is to construct a single-story townhouse building with 4 units in it. It is recommended for approval, and subject to the conditions that the clerk read, and both Mr. Spur and I are on the line if council has any questions on this matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McConnell. So, Mr. Spur, you can hear us and you're on the line here.
Yes, I am.
Did you want an opportunity to speak in favor of or speak to your application?
Yeah, just obviously I'm in favor of it. We're hopefully, if it is approved, we have a decent working relationship with the city, and we'll look forward to meeting any requests of site plan control. Whatever they request us to do, we would go along with that. That's it.
Is Mr. Dedetta on the line?
I am.
Did you want to say anything regarding the application, Mr. Dedetta?
No, I think Sean covered it all.
Okay. Madam Clerk, do you have anybody else on the line that wants to speak in favor of the application? I don't believe we do.
Not in favor. I do have Mr. Dave Wiersbicky. He has been included into the meeting, and he wanted to have an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, Mr. Wiersbicky, welcome to the meeting. I understand you had some comments and you wanted to speak in opposition to the application. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now is your time to do that. I'd
okay.
like you to focus on the application that's in front of us and speak to matters that relate to it. So
Yeah,
go
well,
ahead.
this is what I'm doing.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was down at the planning board, and I wanted to know. I know this deal here is about density increase, eh? So I wanted to know what is proper density, what is, too much, not enough. So they didn't know. They said they don't know the answer. So I said, oh, okay. So then I wanted to know, what is the city's plan, future plan for vacant land within the city? And there is no plan. So I said, well, that's it. So I left. Then I started to say, well, there's nobody going around checking to see at houses or anything, taking a head count so you can get some kind of an idea of what the density is now. And they don't know what it's supposed to be, or or if we're above. Maybe we're above. We've got to tear some apartment buildings down. So this, I said, yeah, okay. But I realized what this is about. This density policy is it's like a loophole to get into government funding or government, or whatever it is, free money. And I don't blame anybody for that.
Mr. Wiersbicky, I'm
Yes.
going to ask you to focus your comments on the actual application. What about the application did you want to, like, this specific application the applicants have in front of us, what about it do you oppose?
Well, one thing I oppose is you're changing the, what do you call it, the law. Now, that's not a small change to go from this kind of a building to two single-family dwellings. That's what I look at. I said, it's nothing small whatsoever. There's no comparison. And then to do it, you go and build this when the existing laws are there for, decades, and everybody had to build and do according to them. Now, all of a sudden, this is it. We're doing it this way, with no regard for the people that had to go along with the plan. So there we are. I don't see why it's good for 4 or 5 houses, and then it's no good for now we got to change it, because I don't figure it's fair at all. And then that's what I say. It's I don't know how to say it. The plan, as for the home, is not there. There's no compromise, like I would say. I don't know. Maybe by building single family, you can't access government grants or whatever. I have no idea. But it just seems an awful shame to ruin a tiny little property like that, or a little street, by putting this in. I mean, I have no idea. But all I know is last week I got an appraiser, and I paid for his services, and we went around, and he says there's no immediate loss of the appraisal. But when you come to sell, the buyer that's going to buy, he says his first impressions of this kind of a building is, where is it? Here, invasive and repugnant. And he said from there, he says that the seller has to lower the price enough for the buyer to say, yeah, this price is better, and I'll put up with it, basically. So that's where your loss is, your depreciation. But other than that, the rest of it, like I said, I'm just, it should be at least trying to be done according to what's there. That was good enough for how many years, and good enough for everybody else. But I see on your agenda, you had 4 of them, and they all seem to be pretty well the same. Get rid of single-family dwelling and go to multiple. So I imagine that's all they're going to be building now. I mean, that's the way I take it.
So Mr.
But I don't-
Mr. Wiersbicki, I'm just gonna stop you for a second. I understand the
Sure.
nature of your objection is the increase in density from single family. Do you have any other objections?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Wiersbicki.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically that's it. You know, it's if it's going to be built, it's going to be built. But I'm just saying, like this application too. I looked at the proposal. There's no proposal for fencing or nothing that I could see. Maybe a little bit on that sketch. But my eyes are bad.
Well, it will be subject to site plan control, and staff will work with the proponents throughout that process. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wiersbicki. I have some counselors that have questions of staff, so I'm going to move on to that. I have Councillor Gardy and then Councillor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. McConnell, I'd assume. Mr. McConnell, could you give a brief history of this piece of property? And could you, as you do that, would you be able to let us know that over the course of the last few decades, has there been anybody who's been interested in building any single detached homes on that property, like officially come to you or the planning department in any way?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Gardy, as part of every application, we go back and we review the history of rezonings on the property. There has only been one previous rezoning on this property. It was 27 years ago in 1993. The owners at the time, Mr. and Mrs. Gooley, applied to rezone the subject property to build a semi-detached unit. That was recommended by staff and it was approved by council. However, the project did not proceed and the property has been vacant since that time. And it was vacant at that time as well. So it's been vacant for some time. So the only application that council has had on this, or that the city has received on this since, is the one application from 1993. That's the only record we have.
Thank you. And just a comment, if I may, Mr. Mayor. One is, I spoke to Mr. Wiersbicki myself about this, and as I tried to convey to Mr. Wiersbicki, this type of development is prevalent because it's popular. In our community, that there are a lot of people who are looking to downsize into something much more manageable, and thankfully we have some developers who are willing to address that need. I'm sure that Mr. Spur and whoever else is involved is going to do their best to ensure that piece of property is maintained as best they can. If you go down that little short section of right, well, the only section of right, it's almost a little kind of a rural setting because of this large vacant property right in the middle of the city. So I could see where Mr. Wiersbicki is a bit challenged by it, but I'm confident that this building will be built well and it will be maintained well, and those concerns will be alleviated in the near future. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Gardy touched on it, but Mr. McConnell, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. McConnell, if the developers wanted to right now, they could build 2 units on that property. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
So would an increase in density from 2 to 4 be considered relatively minor in terms of planning?
Yes, and like a 4-unit building is considered a low-density building in planning planning theory. Yes.
Okay, and I'm not sure if I saw it I'm not sure if I missed it anywhere, but there's no request in here for any funding from the city. Is that correct?
Again, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councilor Shoemaker, that's correct. We have not received any requests for funding assistance with this project.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Spur and Mr. DeDetta, the intention is to build this thing, on your own accord?
That's correct. We're not aware of any funding either. If there was, it'd be nice, but there isn't. It's private money, and that's how it's being built.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to see vacant land be used, Mr. Mayor, and be used in a way that the market, sees fit. And I wish Mr. Spur, Mr. DeDetta, and whoever else is involved in their project well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other councilors want to speak to this matter? Any other questions for staff? Councilor Bruni, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment regarding the developers. I've had contact with the developers. They developed several buildings in the Ward 4 area, and they're very honest, dependable people. They try to, well, they do spruce out the property. They make sure that the property does blend in with the rest of the neighborhood. So I will endorse this 100%. Thank you.
Any other comments, council? Any questions for staff? So for my part, I appreciate the development. I think it's good development, and I think it's nice to see young developers in our community trying to make things happen. Happy to support it. Council, you have the vote in front of you. All in favor for those watching at home? Application's approved. Mr. Spur, Mr. DeDetta, thank you for your time tonight. Your application's approved.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time.
Madam Clerk, could you just tell me who is the acting mayor in August?
Councillor Bruni is the acting mayor.
Councilor Bruni, I'm going to have you start 7.7.4 for me, okay? So you're going to have to unmute Councilor Bruni there so he could do that. I'll be back in a minute.
I have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian. Resolved that the report of the planner dated August 10, 2020 concerning rezoning application E420Z be received, and that council approve the application and rezone the subject property from single detached residential zone R2 to low density residential zone R2S with the following special exceptions. Permit a triplex, reduce the parking requirement from 4 to 3 spaces with a combined stall width not exceeding 8.5 meters, permit parking spaces in the required front yard setback, reduce the west side yard setback from 1.2 to 0.9 meters, permit a stairway structure to project to within 0 meters of the west lot line subsequent to Ontario Building Code requirements. The subject property be deemed an area of site plan control. Further, that the legal department be requested to prepare the bylaws necessary to effect the same. Bruce Wilson, solicitor for the applicant, has been allowed into the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Should we start off with him would you like city staff to make comments on this first?
I think generally Mr. McConnell would speak to it first and then the solicitor.
Thank you very much. Mr. McConnell?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Bruni. This is a existing triplex at the westerly end of Fairview Avenue. It actually at the moment is an illegal triplex, and that's how it came to staff's attention. I believe it came to staff's attention as a result of a sale, and we were not able to confirm the zoning. The application in front of council tonight is to amend the zoning to permit the triplex to remain. And I have to stress there's two parts to this. Even if council were to approve the rezoning tonight, all building code, that would be step one. Step two would be all building code requirements for the triplex would also have to be met. And at this point, we don't know the extent or the costs of that. But that has to happen for both of those matters has to happen for the triplex to remain. It is being recommended for approval subject to a number of conditions, including reducing the amount of parking in the front yard to create some landscaping, which will help to make the building fit in more with some of the other neighbors, well, with all of the other neighbors. It is recommended for approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Wilson is also on the line as the agent for the applicant.
Does Mr. Wilson would like to speak on this?
I really have nothing to add except for I think there's been 3 meters from the PUC there for almost 30 years. Since the early 1990s, there's a record of the 3 meters, the 3 apartments being there. So this is not a new triplex or what illegal triplex. It's been there for many, many years.
Thank you. Councilors, questions? I have Councilor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Question for Mr. McConnell, if I may. Mr. McConnell, as council would be aware that we've received 2 letters from neighbors on this application. Both of these letters refer to a problem with garbage in the yard of this civic application. It also refers to old furniture in the front yard. My first question is there a new owner to this property, or is it the existing owner?
Through you, Acting Mayor Bruni, to Councilor Nero. With regards to the ownership at this point, I think perhaps Mr. Wilson is better able to assist us with that.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, could you answer that question?
Yes, there's an agreement of purchase and sale pending on this property, yes.
So if
it's going to be sold.
So if this application does get approved with the conditions from staff, from our planning department, there would be a new owner who would hopefully enforce or make sure that what has been going on this property to date would cease.
Yes, thank you for that notice. I didn't know we had those letters, but I will see to that. Yes, I'll undertake to advise the new owner of this concern and that it should be rectified.
Okay, and my next question to you, Mr. McConnell, is in the same vein of these problems that these 2 neighbors bring up. None of this, I don't believe, can be addressed through this planning application, but we would have to do it through the building department on a separate submission requesting we look at this issue.
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councilor Nero, that's correct. I think there is a hope, or perhaps better stated, an expectation that the new owner will improve the appearance of the property. If not, that would become a property standards matter through our building division, through the enforcement part of our building division. That's correct.
All right. Those are the only questions I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nero. Is there anybody else that has questions regarding this?
Looks like Councilor Gardy has a question there, Councilor Bruni.
Councilor Gardy, okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Acting Mayor. Through you to, I guess, Mr. McConnell. Who's the current owner?
I believe Mr. Gervaisi is the current owner. Mr. Wilson, can you confirm that for us?
That's correct. That's correct. You're correct, Mr. McConnell.
So I'm just trying to get some clarity here. So it's been a triplex for a number of years, although it shouldn't have been. Is that what is being is that the position here?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, yes, it was illegally converted to a triplex. There were no building permits taken out. We don't know what the quality of the work or whether or not it conforms to the building code. All of that still has to be sorted out. When they went to sell the property, the lawyer, Mr. Wilson, asked for confirmation of the zoning that it was legal, and that's when the triplex was discovered. Hence the application before council tonight.
And yeah, understood. Okay, I just, I'm gonna be pretty honest. I'm concerned that it was operating, if you will, or existing illegally. It was to be no more than a duplex, and it was a triplex. And I understand why it's come to council now, but I'm just, it's disappointing to say the least. Thank you.
Yeah, it was. If I could.
Go ahead,
if I could just add there, yeah, it was Mr. Gervaisi he just bought it, and I don't have it right in front of me, but he bought it the way it is. He wasn't the one that created this triplex. This has been there like that for, like I said, the PUCs had apparently about 3 meters registered their PUC meters since the early 1990s. So it's just one of those things.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Acting Mayor, my comment isn't directed to anyone specifically. It's just that, it seems that, these come before council every now and again. And I think it's much more prevalent than we're aware, or it's as prevalent as we are aware, and we may not be necessarily doing as much as we can about it. I'm just going to leave my comments to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gardy, Councillor Gardy. Is there anybody else? The only question I have to Mr. Wilson is your client, has he accepted the recommendations that the city staff has?
He will. He will. He'll have to. Yes, he'll have to do that. Yes.
The stairway structure.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Councillor Bruni, had Councillor Shoemaker looking to ask a question.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. My apologies. You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Yeah, thank you. Through you to Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, I see it, obviously it's being recommended, so I can see what staff's opinion is on it, but to some extent, is this a way for us to improve not just the safety, but the appearance and the record that the city has with respect to this now being a legal triplex?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that's correct. It gets us two things. I mean, it legalizes, assuming this is approved, it legalizes the use, but it does create an improved appearance to the thing. We will, to the building, or to the yard. We won't have just parking in the front yard. We will have some landscaping in the front yard as well. And equally, or perhaps more important, it gives us conformity with the Ontario Building Code to make sure the building is safe.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so for those reasons, of course, and because it's being recommended, I support the application. Thank you, Mr. McConnell.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? All right. Rachel, do we vote on it now?
I will open it to vote.
Okay, please. And for the public to view, all in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, thank you very much. Your application was passed, I think unanimously. I appreciate your time tonight, and we look forward to the property complying and getting cleaned up. So thank you for that. Thank you, client, for that.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Madam Clerk, I think brings us back to 7.3.1. Am I correct?
It brings us to 7.3.1, and I'll just read that motion. It's a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO, Community Development and Enterprise Services, dated August 10, 2020, concerning the Soo Greyhounds Memorial Cup 2021 bid, be received, and that the request for funding in the amount of $300,000 from the Economic Development Fund for the Soo Greyhounds to host the 2021 Memorial Cup be approved.
I have a list for this. Councillor Nero, you're starting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, I fully support this. I've got just a couple of concerns, and you touched on them when you spoke to this at the outset. My first one is because of the COVID, the numbers certainly are not going to be able to be compared to other places that held the Memorial Cup. And I think you made the comment that we wouldn't go ahead with this unless it was a full experience. And I guess I need to more clearly understand what you mean by that. What is the full experience?
Mr. Ver, before you answer that question, I just want to point out to council, I just received notice that Mr. Lukenda is involved in the meeting, and he is on the line, and he's available also to answer questions. But I wanted to make you all aware that he took the time to call in our request. I want to thank him for that, and recognizing he's participating, I'll pass it back to Acting CEO to answer Councillor Nero's question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Councillor Nero. What I was referring to, and I can let Mr. Lukenda expand on this, is that I know the Greyhounds bid, the financial modeling they've included does include the ticket sales of the event, and the ticket sales would include significant sales within the arena in order to complete their financial picture. So if they're not able to sell out a good portion of the GFL Memorial Gardens due to pandemic issues, then that would certainly affect the event. And maybe I'll let Mr. Lukenda expand on that.
Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. Thanks for inviting me to join your meeting tonight. To address your question, Councilor Nero, this is certainly an ambitious endeavor at the best of times. And when we got into this back in January and threw our hat in the ring, we certainly didn't know and expect that we'd be dealing with a global pandemic at this time. We are proceeding with an approach of trying to put our best foot forward, assuming that we'll be able to operate as much as normal by next June 17th as possible. But we recognize that we don't know what the state of the world is going to be at that point. So when we talk about the full experience, we're going in assuming that it's going to be a full 10-day event, a festival, and a citywide opportunity to really show off our city and to invite tourists and do all of that. In the event that we're not in that position, we'll be working through with the league whether there'll be an event at all. And I've had some preliminary discussions with the league on this, but we haven't had our formal opportunity to meet and discuss the unusual circumstances. We would need participation from the city, from the province, in terms of financial support to be able to pull something like this off, as well as our corporate sponsors. And as Mr. Ver said, we're counting on a solid fan attendance. So we are in very uncertain times. All I can say is that the support we're looking for from the city and others is certainly conditional on an event being able to occur next spring.
Thank you for that answer. If I may, Mr. Mayor, another supplemental question to that. So either Mr. Lukenda or Mr. Ver, does council have another opportunity, depending on what happens with COVID and how it would impact this endeavor, to have the Memorial Cup? So when we get a little further on, when we get into the new year, does this come back to council at all? And would you, Mr. Lukenda, bring back the state of the Memorial Cup at that time and tell us that either you're going to go ahead with it or you're not, or you're going to go partially ahead with it? Do we have another opportunity?
So I think what Councilor Nero is asking is, if we commit to this 300,000 tonight, is that the end of the road? Or is this matter going to be back before council for further kind of consideration and discussion in the context of COVID-19? We'll start with you, Mr. Acting CEO Ver, and then we can, Mr. Lukenda can fill in any blanks you might leave.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero, my expectation would be that if council approves tonight and we're able to have a full experience with the Memorial Cup, June 17th, it wouldn't come back because, things are proceeding according to plan. I think if there were significant changes or modifications, that's where, and the Greyhounds wanted to proceed with the event and there were changes, that's where it would come back to City Council. But I'll let Mr. Lukenda speak to this as well.
Thank you for the question. I concur with what Mr. Ver said. It's important that we go into the proposal presentation understanding what financial commitments we have in place so that we can put our best foot forward. So from my standpoint, we're looking for commitments on the understanding that it is proceeding and it is a full event. In the event that it is not, we will certainly come back and explain that. And in any case, we will endeavor to communicate openly and fully through this process with the city.
Thank you for those answers, gentlemen. I'm fully supportive of hosting the Memorial Cup again, and I hope everything works out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Nero. We'll go to Councilor Bruni and then Councilor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess a question to Mr. Ver, and first of all, I want to say the last Memorial Cup we had here was a complete success. It would be good if it came back to the Sioux. My question is regarding the 300,000. Is there a cost recovery plan? For instance, we provide you the $300,000 to the Sioux Greyhounds, but say come the end of May, everything is already prepared, schedule is completed, GFL Memorial Gardens is prepped, and we've spent $300,000 and it's canceled. Is there a recovery cost for the money that we provided?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the format of the EDF claims would be that it would be costs incurred by the Sioux Greyhounds, that they would submit a claim, and then the city would reimburse those claims. So for the Greyhounds to incur those costs for the event, that would be closer to event date and closer to certainty that the event's going to continue. So we don't anticipate that there will be significant claims or costs until the event is confirmed to proceed. If there was something last minute, that caused a change to those plans, there could be an opportunity where there would be costs that would be, incurred by the Greyhounds and put towards those events that would be effectively sunk costs. And we would look to see what avenues there may be in the future to recover those event costs. And I'm thinking if the event were delayed or if the event were put off for another season, et cetera. I'll let Mr. Lukenda speak to that as well.
Thank you again. I agree with the response. It would be, I want to emphasize that this is, a partnership that we're going into here with the city, and that the city and the Sioux Greyhounds together are hosting this event. So we're going to work in very close working relationship with the city and with the tourism department to plan and prepare for this event of this kind of scale. And it's something that, under the circumstances, we're going to work as hard as we can to have preparations in place, but not incur any unnecessary expenses just in case things unfold in an unfavorable way.
Okay. And my last question back to Mr. Lukenda. They rotate the Memorial Cup, so if it's canceled in 2021, it won't come back to Ontario for 3 more years, correct?
That's generally correct. And in fact, this year it was supposed to be in Kelowna. And Kelowna, when the season got canceled, they lost the opportunity to host the Memorial Cup. And instead of it going to them again the following year, 2021, that we're talking about, it moved to Ontario. And that happens for a couple of reasons. One, there's an agreement that it moves around, but also an important part of the review process by the bid committee is the competitiveness of the team and the expected competitiveness of the host team. And oftentimes a team, because of graduation of players, may not be in a position the following year to be as competitive. So that's a consideration as well. And in our case, we feel that we've got the right team for the coming year, and a combination of uncertainty beyond that and the desire of the league to move beyond. It's unlikely that this would be in Ontario beyond this coming year.
Okay. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Bruni. I have Councilor Christian next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you, Mr. Lukenda, and welcome to council. I certainly appreciate what you and the Sioux Greyhounds are trying to do for our city. I'm old enough to have witnessed many of the major events that we've hosted, and I don't think anybody would argue that they've been resounding successes for our community, both economically, socially, and even psychologically, because it bolsters the citizenry, the spirits of the citizens quite a bit during the event and even afterwards. I do have a couple of more comments, and perhaps Mr. Lukenda you can respond to them in the form of, like, I'm going to offer some comments, but they're almost questions. So let me just go through this quickly. First of all, whenever you look at a report promoting an event like this, I'm always concerned about the stats that are used for prior events because each event is separate in its own right. I'm hoping, and perhaps you can comment on the size of GFL, if it's viable financially to host an event like this. Did the other cities have larger venues that hosted the Memorial Cup? That would be my first question.
Thank you, Councillor Christian, for the question. We are certainly smaller as a community and as an arena relative to the locations of the Memorial Cup over the last number of years. It has generally gone to the larger centers. The Ontario Hockey League has made it a stated position just over a year ago that they thought the ticket pricing of some of these venues was getting a little out of reach, and that they thought it was the downside of going to the larger centers was that it was putting it a little bit out of reach to the average junior hockey fan. So they actually made a motion at our annual meeting to try to encourage smaller centers to have the opportunity to get back in the game, if you will. And because of that sort of change in philosophy and change of sentiment, that was what first planted the seed with me for our city to try to compete for this. We're competing in this case against the city of Oshawa, obviously a larger community, closer to Toronto, Southern Ontario, and the population that entails. In terms of the arena, they're only about 1,000 larger than we are. And the way we've done our planning and our pro forma, if we can get the support that we're looking for from the various levels of government, as well as from our corporate sponsors, one of our main goals, in spite of having a smaller arena at about 4,900, would be to keep our ticket prices at a little bit more manageable level in order that it fits our market.
Okay, thank you. And and I guess my other concern, and you don't really have to comment on this, is depending on where we are with the COVID pandemic, even if perhaps theoretically we're through it, I'm just concerned that there may be some people that would stay away regardless of ticket prices, that they simply are not comfortable at that point to attend an event in close proximity to others. So I'm not suggesting that will happen. It's just a concern of mine. My other thought is that, when I was reading the documentation, it said a significant tournament, and I underline that to try to get to bring forward to explain exactly what that means. And I think it's been explained. But my concern is that the Canadian Hockey League will push harder to run a tournament, even if it is slightly modified, simply to showcase their talent, the leagues, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I have a concern because, we have this provision that says, well, if the tournament goes ahead, we're good. If it doesn't go ahead, all bets are off. The money doesn't need to be used. However, the Canadian Hockey League may decide to run the tournament, even if it's, in their words or thoughts, slightly modified, but may have a detrimental effect on what we're trying to accomplish. Can you comment on that?
Certainly, I'll try to, Mr. Christian, Councillor Christian. We don't know for sure how things are going to unfold, obviously. It is the intention of the Canadian Hockey League and the Ontario Hockey League to host this championship this year. It was the first time in 100 and some years that the Memorial Cup was not held in this past year, and there's certainly every intention to award the trophy the following year. In the event that there had to be some modifications to the size of the tournament or the size of the event, right now it's a 4-team round robin and a 10-day event with festivities of various natures. If that had to be modified, it would affect our overall, both our costs and our revenues to some degree. but there would certainly still be costs that would need to be incurred and covered to host an event even of that scale. And so I guess what I would say is at this point in time, until we know more, I would suggest that I think it would still be a very worthwhile endeavor and investment by the parties concerned, and that there'd be a significant payback for all the reasons that you outlined, both from an economic standpoint and from a city profile and psychological standpoint.
Thank you. And one final question or comment. Has there been any discussions with the Canadian Hockey League, given the situation that we're all in, for their financial support for the winning bid? You know, above and beyond what their investment would be, whether it be in kind, et cetera. Has there been any discussions to say, look, if this is going to be slightly modified, is there some input or some financial support that the Canadian Hockey League itself could provide?
Councillor Christian, to this point, we have not had discussions of that nature.
Okay, fair enough. I would encourage at least a dialogue. I realize that that's a long way off. I'm trying to express my concerns, but by the same token, I support the effort and the resolution. But I just wanted to get on the record my concern, and perhaps going forward, my thoughts and the other thoughts of council will be considered as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Christian. I have Councillor Gardy next.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Lukenda. Mr. Lukenda, I was just wondering if the CHL has indicated to you the latest date at which a decision would be made that could potentially cancel a tournament.
Councillor Gardy, there has not been a discussion of that nature. Perhaps when we have a face-to-face, they'll speak to that. But at this point in time, just recently, last week, in fact, the Ontario Hockey League affirmed that it's our intention to start our season December 1, which puts the finish of the season a little later than normal, and cause the Memorial Cup to be scheduled for about a month later than normal, being June 17th to 27th. So at this point in time, that's the intention, that's the schedule that we'd all be working towards. If something changed from that standpoint, you know, it would be determined at the right time, but certainly has not been discussed at this point.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again to Mr. Lukenda, and I think I heard you answer this, but I would anticipate that if the tournament were to go forward, though it be kind of scaled back, what you may need from the city may be less than the $300,000 that you're currently seeking.
Councillor Gardy, that's possibly the case, and we would certainly have those discussions with the city once we learned anything in terms of a change.
Okay. You know, I'm optimistic that this is something that may go forward in some capacity. You know, unfortunately, we're presented with a once in a generation opportunity, which may be kind of squelched by a once in 100-year pandemic. But I am hopeful that things will be positive, and we'll be able to do it safely in some capacity, and I will be supporting the Greyhounds in this.
Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, I just want to confirm that in your report, you state that there's certainly, right now there's $521,000 uncommitted in the EDF fund. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, that is correct.
Okay. Now, of that 300,000, is there an opportunity to have 150,000 come from the 2020 budget allocation and 150,000 coming from the 2021 budget allocation, so that we're not earmarking 300,000 of that 521 in this certain calendar year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. I think the reality of when most of the costs will be incurred, it will be in 2021. With that said, I know for the Greyhounds, they have to make their bid presentation this year and would like to know that those funds are confirmed. So I think as long as the funds are confirmed, how that money is spent, if another ask came in this year, you know, and it was taken partial out of this year's budget and partial out of next year's, as long as the money was confirmed, I don't think there would be a problem either way.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I just want to confirm that it is a reimbursement funding, so that the Greyhounds will do the report, have the proper documentation before we release the funds to them after the event occurs.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezowalan, that is correct, and that is the way all our EDF claims are processed. The proponents submit claims with their expenses, and then we reimburse based on those submitted claims.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I just have one question for Mr. Lukenda. Mr. Lukenda, certainly would be wonderful to have the Memorial Cup here in Sault Ste. Marie. I definitely agree with that, and hopefully it occurs in the way that we would like it to. My question to you is that, is it critical for you to have this confirmed amount in terms of applying for other funding through NHFC, Tourism Sault Ste. Marie, as well as corporate sponsors that you will be applying to support this event?
Thank you, Councillor Vezowalan. Yes, it is, in terms of we have a number of pieces of the puzzle that we are trying to fit together, as I spoke to earlier, and we need to have as much certainty from all of those pieces at the time we put our we make our actual bid presentation and put our best foot forward. So it's not that the cities needs to be first to leverage other bids. It's just that all of the funding issues are kind of in parallel in application and under discussion. And so we need to try to gain certainty from the various sources as soon as we can and prior to our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Lukenda. I will be supporting this. I think it's something positive for the community, and let's be hopeful that it will come to fruition and in the manner that we would like it to happen. Thank you for your time.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of my questions have been asked, so I only have one left for Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, is there anything down the pipe of this scale that would be this much benefit to our accommodation partners who have suffered greatly throughout the pandemic?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, at this time, no, there are no projects with the scale and scope of the Memorial Cup that we are aware of.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vera. I mean, for more than just that reason, I support this, but if for no other reason, Mr. Mayor, you know, this is a way to assist our accommodation partners recover from probably what's been, I don't know if the worst year on record, but I can't imagine that there has been a worse one. So, you know, if we should and can do this to assist them, it's what we ought to do.
Yeah, Councillor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question's for Mr. Lukenda. Mr. Lukenda, you mentioned that games starting back up in the OHL in January. Do we know anything at this point about what the fan experience will be like for attending those games? Is the plan for full attendance as it was last season?
I think I misspoke if I said January. Our current intention is to start the season in December, so your question is probably even more relevant. Beginning of December is the current plan. And we don't know what the fan experience will be at that point in time. We're really being guided as a league by the medical input, and the Algoma Health Unit in our case would be principally responsible for determining capacity and standards and other things that we would need to comply with in order to have a gathering of any size. So that's very much still in flux. We're going to work cooperatively with our partners and not do anything that would put players or fans at any unnecessary risk. But at the same time, we're hoping that will be enough on the other side of the concern that we'll be able to have a reasonable number of fans by December and more as the season goes on.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, December actually, I think helps our situation much better, giving you guys more time to put together an experience that's both safe and enjoyable. My second question is, does the GFL Center need any capital upgrades to be able to facilitate hosting a tournament of this magnitude?
If that question is addressed at me, Acting CEO, Mr. Bear, did you want to address that? Or do you want me to?
Sure, Mr. LaKenda, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We feel that we have one of the best and newer facilities in the league, and I'm saying that with all pride in the effort that the city put into developing the GFL Center when it did, and it puts us in a great position to apply for an event of this nature. Having said that, there were a number of upgrades that were required, and some that were desired. On the desired front, as you know, we just completed the installation of our new video board in the arena, and we're extremely excited to be able to show that to our community when we start up. And that was an investment by the Soo Greyhounds. The city is busy doing a couple of things within the arena as it relates to lighting and also the board stanchions that were required by the league, apparently some type of alteration, modification to increase safety. So there's some investments that are already being made that will help us in our application that we intend to highlight in our application. Over $1 million through those projects are being invested in what was otherwise a pretty new arena. Having said that, there will be some things that we anticipate we might need to do in terms of making sure that we have appropriate dressing rooms for all 4 teams, coaches' offices, media space, other things of that nature that we're confident we can modify within the existing arena, but it might take some temporary or otherwise modifications to try to make sure that all the required spaces, and they're spelled out very clearly in the bid, are accommodated within our rink. But I'm sure we'll get there. It might cost some money. We've estimated in our budget that there would be some expenditures to comply with those type of requirements.
Oh, okay, are you able to share that estimate with us, Mr. LaKenda?
We've earmarked $200,000 within our overall budget for the types of things that I mentioned beyond the money that's already been spent.
Okay, and that cost would be coming from obviously the general pool of funds that you are currently going around raising. Is that correct? It wouldn't be something that would come back additionally on the city in 2021?
That's correct. It's
okay.
Within our overall budget as needed.
Okay, thank you very much. That answers my questions, and I appreciate your time, Mr. LaKenda.
So council, do we have any more questions, comments? So I'm gonna wrap this up and then we can vote on it. When Mr. LaKenda approached us about this a while back, we were pre-COVID and we were all very excited. And I understand why COVID would have an effect on the perspective that we apply to this. I think it's important in the circumstances that we continue with this effort. I think it's been clear tonight that if this event can't go ahead as a safe event and as a substantial event, it won't go ahead. But we have a lot to offer as a community, and I think that we're looking for an opportunity to showcase that. Been a lot of good work in the last number of years that we really want to show people, and I think we have established that we can host really big events really well. There's a base in this community that will, I'm sure, get out and support the event, and I think we could show people and showcase our community through this event. But look, the primary thing is that we have to stay focused on our health and our well-being and our community's health and our well-being. And it won't proceed if it can't proceed in a healthy way. But we need to look past COVID, and we need to start putting things underway and get things moving that could help us develop and grow post-COVID. And things don't just happen all of a sudden. Things only happen after a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of planning, and a lot of work. So I continue to support this effort. We'll work closely with Mr. LaKenda. As he indicated, this is a partnership between the Greyhounds in the city, and I know staff is constantly talking to Tim and his team about the event and what we can do and how it's going to look. So I think it's important, though, that we signal as a city council and as a city that we're behind it. It's important to signal that to the OHL and the CHL, and it's important to signal that to any other funders that Tim and the team here at the city will be approaching for additional resources. So I want to thank everybody for their work to date. I want to thank Tim for his work, all the Greyhound staff for their work, and the city staff for their work. I think there's a lot of upside here. We'll continue to work together as a strong team, and we'll continue to monitor it. And if it's a go and we can do it safely, we'll do it, and we'll be successful when we do it. And if we have to change it in any way or it's not, we'll be back to council to have those further discussions. And I hope council can find significant support for this in that context. So all in favor? Motion is.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
it's Matt Shoemaker. I lost my feed, but I'm in favor. I'm still on the phone.
Okay. So if you can all cast your vote, any opposed? Seeing none opposed, Mr. Lukenda, the motion's passed unanimously. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you all very much for your support and the continued partnership. We look forward to being able to host this event.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, we've done the bylaws. I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. Is that not correct?
You are correct. I have a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Hollingsworth that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Thank you, council. Appreciate everybody's input tonight.
Thank you.
And Council Shoemaker is also in favor.
Take care.